spectrum, I would not openly, like, even saying it now on this podcast, I'm uncomfortable as fuck saying it. But if I went over back home to Kenya, I ain't saying shit. Like, I will let people throw their assumptions about me, like, oh, you're this, oh, you're that. Like, why do you have tattoos on your head? Why do you have your hair cut the way you do? Why do you wear the things you do? I'm just like, we can talk about it. I am not giving ammunition to people, okay, in those spaces, because I like my life. My life is nice. I love Kenya to pieces, but they got a lot of work to do. So in those spaces, you have to choose your little battles wisely, because if you don't and you say the wrong thing in the wrong space, you could be dead. And that's it. I have had conversations in the past where, well, it shouldn't be like that. I'm like, yeah, it shouldn't be like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of work going towards, kind of changing the narrative. But right now, the majority space in Kenya is homophobic, right? If you are gay or lesbian or bisexual or queer or trans or intersex or asexual or trans, like, if you're anything like that, you need to shut the fuck up over there, right? There's little bubbles where it's safe, but if you go out of those bubbles, then you could potentially be killed. So that's where labels, need to be covert. It's really sad. It's horrible that this even happens. And, I'll prefer to be, my magical unicorn self everywhere. But even in Europe, there are certain places where, like, I know full well that my look already is going to garner some kind of attention where she's not usual. She's not usual. Which segues really nicely and sexily into othering. Othering is a thing. I don't care who you are. Again, I will fight you on this. I don't care who you are, where you are in the world. Othering is a thing. There's good othering and there's bad othering. Okay? All right? And I think it's crucial for people to understand that othering is okay. You just need to understand what kind of othering goes on. Because if you have a label, then there's an us aspect and there's a them aspect. Right? So I am female. Ergo, there are other genders as well, right? There's not just male. Again, I will fight you on this one. But I am female and there are other genders, which does create a space of othering. I am a cis female, right? Where I am, my biological get-up and my mental get-up and my societal get-up, they all smush together in the same waveform, I suppose, right? So in that sense, I am in this space and this is who I am. And those are other people there. They're like-bodied female, cis female people. And we have our space, which is fine. But there are other people out there and we need to include those people, right? And they, because it's not necessarily she, like in the space of female and or women, right? It will be a they space because there are so many different factions of what women, female kind of the space is. And people, who don't want to understand or don't want to accept it will fight. And that's the other. That could potentially be labeled the bad other. But I wouldn't call it the bad other. I would just call it the, probably, the frictioned other. Right? Because I've had conversations again with people who just don't want to understand any of it. And I'm just like, yeah, but if you try to look at it this way, maybe it's a little bit more comfortable for you. And they're like, oh yeah, it is. Okay, cool. Now I understand. I'm like, oh, phew, that was easy. Now let me just go to Kenya and do it without getting killed. So with that, othering is okay. It's just when people get really upset or annoyed or want to be stuck in their ways and they don't want to accept that there's other angles, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when you have these fights, these issues, these conversations, these protests, these needs for laws to come into place to just make the acceptance of others an okay thing. It doesn't need to be drama. It doesn't need to, no one's, stamping on your neck right? The people who want to be seen are usually the ones who have someone, some old school kind of mentality being stamped on their neck. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And this is why labels are helpful, right? And this is why also labels might not be helpful, because certain people might get overwhelmed. And yes, it's not our duty to, pander to blah, 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 whatever, fine. Certain people will get overwhelmed. So kind of reeling things back to a space that they understand and then pushing into spaces that they don't understand is more helpful than screaming and telling people like, this is the way it should be and that's that. And like, fuck your feelings. Because you're just going to create more enemies. Like you're now pandering, you are now pandering to the frictioned other, right? The frictioned othering, which doesn't help people. Comment, the world has never been a more divisive place. And until we can become unity in our consciousness, we will eventually destroy ourselves. I am going to challenge that. So this is just a comment that's come in. I love this. Like, if you've got things you want to say them. I'm using StreamYard for a reason, so we can have this conversation. The world was way more divisive further back in time because we had smaller collectives of people. We didn't have the internet. I'm talking, a time when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have telephones, like letter writing might have been the only form of association we had. In those times, people were born, raised, and more or less died in a village. And that's what they had. They had this village. So this space was this village. This space was that village. That, right? If you wanted to go somewhere, like it was a big thing because you'd have to go on a horse or walking. In Africa, in large places of Africa, it's still a thing where like if you need to go to a main town, you're either walking for 2 days, 1 or 2 days. And I'm not talking like a 6-hour day. I'm talking a 24-hour day, right? You need to sleep, obviously, but you're going. It's effectively a pilgrimage. Or at a specific time, if a bus comes once a week, or you've got a cousin who has a motorbike that might just make it to the city before it needs to get fixed up again before it can take you back. Isolation was a huge thing that encouraged othering purely on a geographical level, right? And as the world started getting more connected and it got bigger in the sense of, our hermitages and our villages would become bigger into like towns where, there's maybe 400-500 people up to 1,000 people. And then they get bigger into cities and megacities, all these kind of things. These circles of association now start kind of having to intersect each other. So as a result, our little pockets of like-mindedness now kind of has to accommodate and associate with other spaces, which is fine, perfectly fine. But as monkeys, as apes, we have a threshold of how many genuine connections we can have at any given time. And I know for chimps it's like 100. I think we're at about 150, which is the size of a hermitage, either a hermitage or a village. That knowledge is gone because I need to have more knowledge about alcohol, beverages, and stuff whilst I'm teaching. So the amount of like proper human, definitely the amount of like actual human connections one person can have of like actual full-on high quality connections, I think is between 150 and 165 people at any given time. So things like social media and stuff means we have a lot of superficial touch points, right? If you have a friends list, I think I have a friend on Facebook. I think it's over 1,000. I switched off when it went over 800. I was like, I don't know who these people are, like, but I do have connections with, it changes over time. But if you have like a friends list of over 1,000, or you've got, X thousand followers, wherever they are, you don't know every single person. You can't know every single person. You can try as much as possible to have the same kind of vibration of people who are in your space. But there's going to be people that are going to disagree with your stuff, and they should, right? Because we've gotten so big, and because, we've expanded so quickly, and we've created a digital consciousness, for want of a better phrase, there is going to be bashing. There is going to be disagreement, and we have to have disagreement. We have to have critical thinking. We have to disagree and be okay with disagreeing, because that creates frictionless othering. So I think the idea of full-on unity. So again, I'm going to be slightly controversial with this comment, the end bit, the unity in our consciousness. We need to become a unity in our consciousness, because we will eventually destroy ourselves. I think if we're going to go down that angle of consciousness thinking, because I'm very much in that space. I think about 10 episodes ago, I spoke about my whole space in that. I might come and touch it again. This is with the plant medicine episode. I'm very much in the space, but not as hugely as people would think, but I am. Unity in consciousness means we have to destroy ourselves. We have to. Like, if we're going to look at what ourselves are, it's the ego. And man, do I really want to go down this route? Because this is going to be like a freaking 90-minute monologue. I mean, it's already been a 25-minute monologue. No, I'm not going down that hole. But trying to say that we need to have a unity in consciousness is a little bit misleading, because Western ideologies of consciousness versus Eastern ideologies of consciousness versus African ideologies of consciousness, right? Because we're a huge ass continent that people forget is huge. And people forget, like, we have huge spiritual history that only the elders have. And if you go home, and you can reach them and you can tap into that, then you start understanding that there's huge stuff that, like, no one can even really comprehend, but it's there in books, but unless you look for it, you won't find it. But consciousness in a conventional Western ideology is problematic. I'm going to leave it at that, because, like, there's a whole conversation here, and Cora, like, I'm going to message you, because we need to have a chat, because I love this kind of stuff. But again, I don't want to go down into a huge monologue, because it's a good topic. It's a really good topic, but we are still kind of sitting in the space of labels and the dangers within and how they're helpful. And I'm currently in the space of community and othering, which was answering your question anyway. I think I spent 10 minutes answering that. So pulling it back, we need to be careful with labels, because they're great. No doubt they're great. They're helpful. Our names are labels as well. Of course, if someone mispronounces or misspells my name, I pop an eye vessel every time someone spells my name with a Y, because I'm like, it always happens after I've spelled my name, right? You can see it if you're watching this. You can see it in the bottom left corner. It's with an I. And if you pronounce your vowels in the two different ways they're meant to be done, it still makes sense. If it's shiggy with an I, shiggy. If you spelt it with an E, I'd probably understand that more, but like a Y, shiggy, the only word I can associate with that is sloppy. But labels are important. Another tangent that I'm going off on to look for Y's. If you say A-E-I, shigai, that wouldn't make sense. No one's ever said that. But A-E-I-O-U, E is I. A-E-I, E-E-I-O-U. So shiggy kind of associates with that side of things. Yay! Did you know that I'd learned English, and English is not my first language, but it's my only language? Now you do. So it's really important to kind of look into yourself. I'm going to wrap this up, because I have to hobble to a climbing gym. It's going to take me forever. So this is going to be a fun, short episode, because there's a lot of scope with this one, and I want